are rolling. All right. So we left off on the podcast. What did we finish talking about? On the, by the way, this is going to be like a multi-series with Robbie because we just keep running our mouths. It's like it's nonstop. We get a lot of good shit to talk about. We were just talking for like 15 minutes about Mike Boyle and stuff. So I mean, this podcast can go on and on. We all know so many people. What did we leave off on last time? We talked about
very last thing was with Brooker. I was asking Brooker about what fatherhood meant to him. He kind of touched on it a little bit, but other topics that we did want to touch on was just like, what do we feel the meaning of life is currently? Why are we here? What's our purpose? In the last episode, and we spoke a lot about coaching, the role of coaching. We spoke about goal setting and setting out goals and sort of like,
okay. Yeah. So I listened to Scott Adams. That's the author of Dilbert, right? Is that what it is?
Yep.
So, dude, you know what he did? He ended up doing his comics and releasing them for free. When he first started, it was like when the internet first started, and he talked about this on the Tim Ferriss podcast. And he said when the internet like kind of first started, he had Scott Adams at AOL.com. And he said, hey, here's all my stuff. Email me and tell me what you think. And that's how he started becoming like really, really famous and really starting making money and stuff. But he goes into his thought process on goals versus systems, which I thought was awesome. And he doesn't believe in goals at all, because by actually setting a goal, he says you'll end up missing the bigger picture or missing something even better than that. Like if I sit here and I'm like, oh, I want to generate this amount of money, or he said, 200 years ago, a goal when the future was quasi predictable made sense. Like, all right, well, I got 100 acres, and if I plow 10 more, I'll be able to yield 10% more crops. Like that makes more sense. This is a goal. Let me plow 10 more acres. But he said, now the way things are so unpredictable, there is zero reason to have any goals. He says, what you need to do, which is what Brooker was saying last time, was you want to put systems in place, which will help with improvement. And I was talking about this with one of my kids last night. And he gets really upset about school with recruiting and stuff. Like this is huge for these kids, like right now. And he wants to go to an Ivy League school. All these kids, they know the kids that I train, they see the bigger picture, but they still want, like, they want the bells and the whistles. They want the offers. They want the D1 offers. They want this, they want that. But they know like, I should probably go to like a Princeton or a Harvard or a Yale, like, oh, boohoo. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't get the offer from the Division I program, like, Alabama or Michigan. I tell all my kids that my goal for them is to get into either like a Stanford, a Duke, a Michigan, or something outrageous like that. Or if you can't play sports there, then you go Ivy League. And if you can't do that, then you go like NESCAC. So NESCAC is like schools like Williams, Amherst, all schools like that are they're Division III, but they're incredible educations. And all these kids know that you go to these educational schools and you come out and you're set for life. But everyone has this ego and they're like, oh, well, I set this goal and I want to achieve this goal. And the kid was telling me, goes, I struggle sleeping because I'm really upset. Because what if I don't achieve my goal? And dude, this is exactly what the fuck Scott Adams is talking about, right? You're sitting here and you're losing your mind trying to achieve a goal that realistically, like, whether you achieve it or not is not necessarily on you. I said to him, I said, bro, like if a coach likes you or not, that really doesn't have much to do with you as long as you put the proper systems in place and you're continuing to get better, right? It's all about the self-improvement. That's all that fucking matters, right? Not where you end up per se, right? Like if the Princeton coach doesn't like you, like how are you going to control that? You can't. All you can do is just control what you can control. So I loved what Dilbert was saying with that, or Scott Adams was saying with that.
So Scott Adams is he's a fascinating guy to me because, he's also a trained hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And what have you? So you didn't read any of his books, Mike?
Mm-mm.
I got two of them here. One is like how to fail at almost everything and still win big, and that's like his life autobiography. Definitely read that. That's awesome because he had so many issues. Like he would keep. I think he had like like if you get stage fright where you can't go to toilet, but he had that like on an extreme level or something like this. He would stop. He couldn't publicly speak. Couldn't even speak to anybody that he didn't know without severe problems. He'd failed like a bunch of different businesses. I think he ended up bankrupt a couple times too. And now this guy's worth so much money. And I mean, have you seen the things that? Have you seen what his missus looks like?
No.
Google that up and then chuck that up on the screen because you're going to lose your fucking mind at this. This is really funny. But there's a few other concepts that I love from him, and one of the other ones is also we've mentioned it before. It's the skill stacking. So many people are always like, "Oh, I need to be the best in one thing," but the truth is that it's going to be really flipping difficult. I mean, Tiger Woods is the best at golf. That's great for him, but yeah. So. Right. And so
let me share.
Yeah, go on, put it up.
So I type in Scott Adams into Google, and the first thing that comes on is his wife. Like, yeah. What the hell? It's fucking.
And bro, she's crazy. She's like a neuroscientist and a pianist and stuff. He's good for him, man. He's crushing it.
Oh, good for him. But so one thing that he was talking about was with goals was he gave the example of like hitting on chicks. He says, my goal was to have a girlfriend, and I wanted, so what did I do? I went and I asked out, a girl that was, a 9 or a 10. And I was probably, a 4 to a 6 at that point. I asked her out. She said no. I said, shit. So I spent 3 months learning about her, doing all this stuff. Like, and then I asked her out, or excuse me, I really fucked that up. He said he researched her for 3 months first and, found out all this stuff, and then finally got the courage to ask her out. She says no. Whereas his buddy just went down a line. He said, hey, will you go out with me? No. Will you go out with me? No. Will you go out with me? No. He goes, so, I mean, was his tactic the best? Like, no, not necessarily, but he got a lot of good practice out of it. So by constantly talking to, he learned a lot of good skills. He learned how to talk to people. He learned how to overcome fear. He learned how to deal with failure. And I mean, there was a lot of things, valuable things by just going and doing it, rather than what Scott Adams did was for 3 months sitting there and, trying to be that person. And then either he wasn't good looking enough, or she just wasn't interested, or she had a boyfriend, or all the above. So right. I loved it. I'm still listening to more and more of his stuff. He's a quirky cat though.
Do yourself a favor and listen to the book.
Listen to
his book? How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And then he wrote another book called Win Bigly. But read the How to Fail at Almost Anything first. But he's also fascinating because he has a daily Periscope that he does on Twitter that has hundreds of thousands of people that watch it. And if you watch the very first episode, it is terrible. And it just goes to show you keep showing up, you keep doing the same thing, and also you be unique. So that's what I was mentioning too about this whole idea of skill stacking. He knows he says it himself, I'm never going to be the best cartoonist or drawer, but I'm pretty decent at it. So if I'm a cartoonist and I'm a hypnotherapist and I have business acumen, and he has a couple things, as you stack all of them up, he's a very, very unique cat compared to everybody else. So, and that's one of his main topics. And man, he's a wealth of information, Scott Adams. You should definitely look into him. He's fantastic. And he's an expert in terms of persuasion. And when you read his book, you'll see exactly what I mean. And also listen to some of his Periscope stuff too, because for general psychology work, as well as he makes outrageous predictions sometimes about things, but some of them come true. Just because he sees the undercurrents of the way that sort of society's moving and stuff. So he's a really interesting guy. Definitely look him up.
So with the skill stacking, we had on yesterday, and it was a podcast we released today, we had on Dieter. How do you say his name?
Dieter, yeah.
What's his last name?
Scherer.
Dieter Scherer. Yeah. So, and he's a wealth manager. How many billions does he manage?
No idea.
No
idea. He wouldn't tell us probably anyway.
This guy's legit. And you know, we were talking about it in our last podcast, Robbie, where I have a bunch of different, not goals, but avenues that I want to go down. And I was talking about this with Keir as well. And it makes me feel like a fraud almost, because I am spending a lot of time learning about finances, right? Where I should be dedicating a lot of this time to, well, I need to learn about speed training, and I need to learn about rehab, and I need to learn about all that. Like, why am I spending all this time doing all these different avenues? And then I thought about Mike Boyle, and this is a guy that flipped 40 houses. But when I think of the world's best coaches, I don't necessarily, Mike Boyle doesn't come to mind, but he's like one of the first. I look at him as like the godfather of personal training. You know what I mean? Like, he is that guy. He did it first, and it seems as though he's doing it best. But it makes me, I don't know. It makes me feel almost a negative way to be learning about money and to be learning about finances and how to make more money in different avenues outside of this. But then I go back to the Scott Adams with the skill stacking, and it's almost as if I do have a responsibility to myself and to my clients to be able to learn all these different avenues, because it makes me that much more valuable in the long run, because I also, now I have security. So I have financial security. So I won't ever have to rob anyone blind for money, right? If someone can't pay, I won't ever have to turn them down because I have other avenues coming in. And on top of that, by learning a new skill and learning a new trade and having something else going on, I can come up with more analogies, right? And they had a, I think it was in the book Range by Epstein. And in that book, he said they had a whole bunch of specialists, like dermatologists or something, coming in to try to figure out what was wrong with this one problem. And then they took a bunch of doctors from outside, like there were dermatologists, there were general practitioners, there were anesthesiologists, to try to figure out a general problem. And the group of general doctors or more doctors came up with more analogies, which made it easier for them to solve the problem than just the dermatologists alone, right? I'm butchering it, but the point is, the more variety you have, the easier it is to come up with different ways to solve problems, potentially making it that much easier for you to solve problems. What do you think of all this, Robbie? We just fucking freestyled now for 15 minutes on this shit. What do you think?
There's definitely parts of what you've just said there that resonate with me. I'm pretty sure I heard this on Peter Attia's podcast, where I know in America, the medical model is a little bit different. Like, you know, you have to have a degree before you do medicine in America. Like, where in Ireland and UK, you can just go straight into medicine. Like, you know, you might have to do a pre-med year, depending if you've no science background. But Peter, I don't know if it was Peter that said this himself or if it was a guest he was speaking to. But for some reason, anyway, I think I heard this from Peter Attia, is that the students who had like backgrounds actually in philosophy or even like psychology, they nearly had more of an advantage than some of the doctors who came in from more classical biology and chemistry, because it just gave them a better perspective. It allowed them to have more of a universal outlook in terms of patient care and just medicine in general. And listen, as you know from our influence from James, I mean, more knowledge is not a bad thing. And you also start to see that like there's universal principles that tie everything together. So I always got this from Mladen Janovic, you know. So Mladen has actually put aspects from economics into coaching manuals. So he often talks about like Ray Dalio's all-weather portfolio, and he would use that as an analogy for concurrent training, in that you keep a thread of everything in your program. And in quality investments, or like never put all your eggs in one basket, always spread it out, because if one thing goes, you have all these other sort of areas that you can fall back on. Same too in training. If you just dedicated everything to one biomotor quality, let's say like all strength, everything else goes, because if you don't use it, you lose it. Whereas if you kind of have like a an emphasis sort of block system kind of going. So like Mladen has used those analogies and seen patterns. So that's one thing that resonates with me, is that, yeah, you might look at that and say, oh, what's investing got to do with coaching? And then it's kind of like, I heard Stu McMillan say from Altus, he goes, I don't read coaching books anymore, but every book I read is a coaching book. And what he meant by that is there's always something you can take from every book that is applicable to your specialty, because everything's connected in some way. There's some underlying principle that connects everything together. So I fully agree with what you're saying in terms of it's broadening your perspective. It's making you a better person, which in turn makes you a better coach, which makes you better to be able to facilitate clients and whatnot. And one thing I will say, just final bit, is that, like, if you think about it too, Mike, you learn about investments and then becoming more savvy in terms of finances can only be a good thing, because, like, although money may not give people happiness, it definitely gives people more opportunity. And if you're someone who is looking to contribute to society in a positive way, then it's only a good thing that you learn how to get better with money and investment, because it'll allow you to do more things. Like Mike Boyle example, go back to Mike Boyle's example, like, he does some great stuff for like organizations, and I just know from being a person who deals with him privately, like the stuff he's done for me over the years, because of the position he's allowed himself to be in now from all the years of hard work and investment he's done. So again, I think the more you broaden your skills and your knowledge, can't be a bad thing.
So what are you trying to do
in terms of like where I'd like to go or see or do? Or
yeah,
well, yeah, I mean, that is a good question. I suppose I'm always trying to reevaluate core values. Like, I mean, that's really what I think that's why a lot of us get lost. You know, it's like, well, what are you trying to answer? What's the question? And it's one thing I learned from Tony Robbins, to get very clear on your question. If you want to talk about life, it's supposed to get very clear then on your mission. And also understand that in a perspective that your mission is ever changing. You're never locked down to any one thing, because life is just a journey. I always think of it as a book with multiple chapters. You know, one chapter closes and another one opens up. Kind of like, who's to say, like, you'll be in coaching forever? That coaching chapter could close one day and, oh, Mike's a multi-million investor now in Wall Street.
I don't know about that.
I suppose, Mike, like, if I just look back at core values, first of all, it's just to make sure that I think it has to start with yourself. I think we're always trying to work on liking or loving ourselves more, because, you know, if you don't wear it, you can't share it. And I think that's also a dynamic process. And I think there's days where you're better to yourself than other days. It's never going to be like this place you get to one day and go, I finally love myself, and that's it forever and ever. It's dynamic and it's in flux. But I think we're always trying to self-improve in some way. So that sets us up then to be able to interact and facilitate someone else. And then it's kind of, I see it as a dual process, in that if you can help someone, you get some satisfaction from that. And then it kind of just snowballs into that cycle of, you know, you're getting fulfillment from that, you're helping another person achieve fulfillment, and it goes through. So I would say number one is core values, looking at that, health and wellness, because if you're not healthy and you don't have some sort of mental and physical well-being, you know, you don't have a foundation. And then I'd say after that, it's contribution, trying to give back. You know, to those who have a lot, they have a lot to give, they have a responsibility to give, you know. So I'm not saying that like it's a white guilt first world thing, but I suppose, you know, I do realize I'm lucky to be where I am in terms of my position. So yeah, I would say contribution back to the world is what I'm trying to do. And in terms of how I'm doing that, I suppose the medium I would look to be doing that through is through research, getting my PhD, contributing to health and wellness. Like, I love circadian biology, health, physiology, connecting dots between work of certain researchers and coaches, and seeing if I can come up with something that could contribute then to the world in terms of health, wellness, longevity. So maybe that I could leave the world with something that helps people live a better life. That's essentially it, you know.
So I want to keep asking you stuff, because what are you getting your PhD in, or what do you want to get your PhD in?
So the current grant proposal that we put in for, so I suppose there's two ways to look at a PhD. There's one where you could do a PhD where you're like, I really want to research this area, but the likelihood of it getting a grant, it mightn't be too likely. So you might have to end up doing a PhD to get your PhD, which will then allow you to become a professor at something then you want to do. See what I'm saying? But the current proposal we put in is to look at sleep and high performance in first emergency responders. So we're looking to do work either with Coastal Guard service here or fire brigade, or maybe potentially first emergencies in hospital, because again, those people, like, they are heroes in fairness, and they're sacrificing their health and longevity. It's ironic, you know what I mean? Like, you know, first emergency responders, and although I think lay people confuse medicine with health, and it's not. Like, the whole medical model is purely to, like, it's just like managing disease and injuries. That's what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, so you get people who always bash the conventional medical model. It's like, but that's what it is. Like, they go to school to learn pathology. They don't go to school to learn health longevity. That's someone else. That's their role. Their role is like, when you're already fucked up, their role is like, okay. Yes, we're looking to research in them in terms of their attitudes towards sleep, and then their sleeping habits, and how could we facilitate their performance acutely through certain strategies. So, like, if you're on a shift call and you're a coastal worker and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and like a phone call comes in and says some idiot teenagers are off drinking and they went out to the ocean to see if they could swim against the tide. Now they're fucked. So you got to get out. You got to get out there, get on the helicopter, and get out there. And like, you're in stage 3 or 4 deep sleep, and you wake up and you have that sleep inertia. It's like, what strategies can we help to get these people, boom, gone? And then what strategies can we put in place to mitigate the long-term health, detrimental impact? Because like, that's, we know that's shift work, and like, you know, very forceful, brief waking up periods in the middle of the night are like just brutal for long-term health. So we'd like to do like longitudinal data where we take biomarkers and basically just look at the biological cost of that type of work, because something we want to filter out is, do you actually get people who are just mutants, as in like, do people like nearly self-select for this work? Like, they're just, so whatever biological way they're wired up, they can actually sustain that type of work better than most human organisms. Because again, circadian disruption to most humans is a disaster in terms of longevity and health. But do these people who go into like Navy SEALs or Coastal Guard work or first emergency responders, do they just have something like almost genetically that they're almost more robust and resilient to be able to handle those assaults to their biology, that it doesn't, you know? So if we looked at their telomeres compared to some other groups' telomeres, you know, even though telomeres have been questioned now about terms of longevity and health. Sorry, but I'm rambling now myself, so you shouldn't let me do that. Sleep and performance is kind of what we're looking at in first emergency responders, and it's kind of coming up with strategies to help them with performance. And then also, is there any strategies that could mitigate the detrimental impact of that type of work? You know, because again, circadian disruption is linked to everything now, like mental health, obesity, cancer, diabetes. Like, it's down. Like, I mean, shift work is down as a associated carcinogen in the World Health Organization. So that's kind of what we're looking to propose.
Have you seen the research with residents and sleep?
I've seen some of it. Yeah, I've seen the one where there was 4 groups, and it was one group had a full night's sleep, no alcohol. One group had no sleep. One group had sleep but were alcohol, so they got drunk. And then the 4th group was no sleep and got drunk. And they looked at the performance of all 4 groups. And so obviously the group that had no sleep and drunk were the worst. But the next group that were worse was the no sleep group, and they were almost just as bad as the drunk and no sleep group, and they were worse than the drunk group that got sleep. So Matthew Walker. Now I know that Matthew Walker has been pulled up over some of the statements in his book. Mm-hmm. He did do a rebuttal. I listened to the rebuttal. I actually didn't even read the article that condemns, or not condemned, but it was arguing some of the points in his book, because one, it was long, I didn't get a chance to go at it. But usually, I suppose I'm making an assumption here, and I shouldn't. But usually, those things are like just people like just attacking people, and it's just like, you know, come on, okay. Yeah. Everyone kind of jumps about a little bit, but like, still look at his book in a little more perspective. He still has done a lot of good. Like the amount of people that got in contact with me after that Joe Rogan podcast, like, did you hear like sleep's amazing? You know, get 8 hours, and I was like, yeah, how about that? You know, it's like I've only been, because this is no word of a lie, since 2010, because I can clearly remember this. I was 23 and I was in bits health wise. I had no energy. I was lethargic. Couldn't get a boner. Was just like literally depressed. Was like, what? I'm 23. Like, this should not be happening. And my whole health and energy completely changed when I learned about circadian biology. Because what I was doing up to that point was staying on my laptop till midnight routinely. And I would go to bed at 12 and I would sleep till 7. I'd be groggy as fuck. But in my head, I was like, I'm getting 7 hours of sleep. Like, surely that's enough. But as soon as I learned about like light and blue light and all this, again, this is 2010, and I said, right, I'm going to give this a go. I started falling asleep at like 8 p.m. Like, I was like, my body wants to go to bed. And I was just like, right, I'm just going to go to bed and see what happens. And I would sleep from like 8:30, 9, or 8:30, 8:30, as they say in America. I remember the first time I went to America and they're like, what time is it? And I was like, 2:30. And they're like, what? You mean 1:30? Like half of 1? I'm like, no, 2:30. And they're like, 1:30. And they're like, no. And then someone came and go, he means 2:30.
Mate, you know what's even funny though? In Swiss, they say like if you say 2:30, like for us, it's 2:30, right? But 2:30 for Swiss is 1:30.
Yeah.
So imagine how many times I got that fucking wrong.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. Just like the way you say alu fucking minium. And those phony fucking accents of yours, everything you guys do is just to be fucking different. Oh, we're British. We're fucking better than you.
Mate, I'm not British. Just be very careful on that.
I was yelling at Brooker for this one.
I'm just saying that for the Irish listeners. If I don't say it, I'll get emails. You know, there's an 800-year history there between the Irish things. Now, I don't give a rat's, but there is some people that still do.
Oh yeah.
But just finishing up on that, so 2010, I said I'll give the sleep thing a go. Like, you know, all right, I'll go candlelight at nighttime and I'll block this blue light and blah blah. But long story shorter, trying to make it shorter, my energy just went, everything just fixed. Like, you know what I mean? Everything came back online. Like everything, energy was the big thing. And I can clearly remember literally a week into this, and it was like 2 or 3 p.m. and that was the time of day I would just feel horrible, and I was like bouncing around. Like I was literally felt like I was like, some people must be looking at me thinking I'm on cocaine, like, because I had so much energy. And I said to myself, I will never sacrifice sleep as long as I live ever again. And I've been pretty good in my sleep ever since that. So that got me into sleep, just got me to, and then it got me into circadian biology, and then I was like, holy shit, circadian biology kind of like dictates everything. You know, like light is like, because when you break everything down, we're going biology, which is supported by chemistry, which is supported by physics, and then you get into mathematics. But within the physics model, then you have the study of light and biophotons, and what moves an electron is light. Like the electron bounces off light, so the particles fly all around the nucleus. So everything's just light. Like even when you, so, and when you say that to lay people, they're like, this guy is woo. He says we're light. And it's like, that's actually what we are though. Like when you eat food, you're just eating light, because plants photosynthesize, and then we eat plants, or else we eat animals that eat plants. So when you start to break it down more, like your proteins, carbs, and fats, they just break down into protons, electrons, and neutrons. And then if you break that down even further, it's subatomic particles. You break that even further, and now you're getting down to biophotonic level, and that's light. That's all it is. So it's
Robbie,
just.
What do you know about sun staring? Have you heard about that in terms of resetting the circadian rhythm?
Yeah, so I don't know so much about like directly staring at the sun, but like there's very good evidence to support AM sunlight in resetting your circadian biology, because it's got to do again with the blue spectrum and the melatonin and cortisol axis. So blue light obviously depresses melatonin, cortisol goes up, and it just helps to regulate. So the primary circadian regulator is light. Like that's the strongest one, because it goes into your eye and it goes to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is in the supraoptic region of your hypothalamus. And then that's your what's called your central clock. But around your body, you have what are called peripheral clocks. So like your liver has circadian clocks, your heart, your stomach, your skeletal muscles. And they can also have input from other, or circadian input from other, what they call zygibers, which are like, it just means a timekeeper. So meal timing is another way to kind of reset your circadian clock. Yeah, that's literally where you just dropped off. Yeah, no, so timing of meals is another way to realign your circadian clock. It's not as strong as light, but it's another way. And exercise too, because you can manipulate body temperature through exercise. So like there's rhythms within rhythms across a day. So like your body temperature generally peaks in the evening time. You know, I find this area of research very fascinating too, is the area of chrononutrition. So again, meal timing. And what the research seems to show, I think, Mike, you've spoke about this before, I've heard about it too, is like, it seems from a metabolic standpoint, we are more designed to take in the majority of our calories during daylight rather than night.
But to me, like, that's common fucking sense. It's it's a creation of artificial light that made us want to eat at fucking nighttime. That's it. You can't if you can't fucking see, you can't fucking eat. Like how is this, like, to me, like, to do research on this shit? It's like, holy fuck, what a waste of time.
Well, I suppose
also, just a little point. Sorry, I mean, if you know this common sense stuff too. I mean, I find it fascinating, you know, how you can manipulate the blue light. But if we take it like bare bones, rather than looking for like an intervention or a hack to try and sleep better, you go out and camp. You ain't even got to push it that hard. As soon as you ain't got a laptop and fucking lights and shit, you just want to go to bed. You fall asleep. You have a great night's sleep, even if it's a shitty mattress and pillow. You wake up with the sun and you'll feel happy as Larry most of the time, right? So where do you? I mean, I always question this. I mean, we're always looking for hacks and tricks and like not really changing the source of things, but just looking for another, you know, plaster on top, like a Band-Aid on top of a, you know, actually incorrect behavior. I mean, let's be adult about it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to stare at Netflix until 2 o'clock in the morning, of course you're going to be wired up and you're going to sleep like shit, you know?
But I think too, it's just that modernity it's completely mismatched to what has been natural to humans. You know, so I mean, if you just even look at this, like, you'd know this, Brooker, from the UK, like most teams, amateur teams, rugby, soccer, football, as we'd call it in this side of the world, but I'm just saying soccer for international listeners. Well, now in Ireland, we'd say football would mean Irish football, Gaelic football. But like most teams train in the evening time. So you get guys who are training at 7 p.m. and this could be in October, November, December, January, when it's dark and it's cold and they're underneath the bright lights, and they go home and they're wired from the exercise, the adrenaline, and then obviously the stimulation of light, and then they have to eat, or they, you know, they're like, well, like, we trained, we have to eat. So then they're taking a big bolus of food in. So in terms of our human physiology, this is completely foreign to it, because again, like, our lives are like literally a speck of dust off our fingernails in the whole evolution of humans. Like, we're here for just a fleeting moment. We're not even a fart in the wind. Like, so, you know, out of all of human physiology, I mean, everything drastically changed when Edison came along and the mess, you know, or like made the light bulb widespread, because again, he took away the nighttime. I mean, Mike, you just alluded to there. I mean, if you think about it, like, we don't experience winter anymore. And we spoke about this with Alan Watts the last day. You can't have a yin without a yang. You can't have a left without a right. You can't have an up without a down. And in terms of the way humans live now, in terms of first world countries anyway, we don't have winter. Because you can be in your home in December with the light on, with the heating on as well. So there's temperature as well. We're not getting the cold temperature. We're getting the light on. And you also have access to foods that you wouldn't have access to because we had a season. Right. Like, you shouldn't be able to access pineapples or bananas or, you know, these highly refined carbohydrates in the middle of November and December from an evolutionary standpoint. Now, like, I mean, listen, a lot of this is like just mechanistically looking at it. Like, I don't think there's any hardcore scientific evidence, definitely not in humans, because you wouldn't be able to run the trials. But it's piecing together like evolution, human physiology, anthropology, all these fields together, and saying like, this makes logical sense that we were meant to go through summer, and then we were meant to go through winter, and then cycle through that. It's actually made me think about like, this is an area like, I don't know how you probably have to do it maybe on a road model, and then obviously there's people saying, no, it's not completely applicable to humans, but it's often made me think about too, like, literally people getting pregnant in the winter time and having, you know, because really evolutionary, again, most people should have got pregnant in the summertime and then had the baby when springtime came along. See what I mean? So even just like things like that, is there genetic or epigenetical advantages to being more aligned to getting pregnant in the summer and then going through the winter and then having the baby come springtime? Like, is that more natural in terms of the evolutionary of human physiology and stuff like that? Because in the book Lights Out by T.S. Wiley, she wrote that book in 2000. She was kind of the first person to start piecing this together. She basically sees high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, and diabetes she sees those as pre-hibernation strategies. So she was like, in the summertime, there was more food because there was longer light. So you ate more. So you actually put on like half a stone, because you needed that to get through the fast of the winter when food was more scarce. So she was like, they were actually advantages in. So basically, like, obese people are winning. Like, you know, evolutionary, they're winners. They're like, they're doing what they're meant to do. They're meant to eat loads when there's light around and when there's very powerful foods to get ready for the winter. But the winter doesn't come anymore, and the scarcity doesn't come. So T.S. Wiley's whole thing was like summer, long light, high carbs, refined, mating as well. Lots of mating went on. The winter time came, little food. You burned off your body fat into ketosis. You hibernated more. There was less food. And if there was food, it was more animals you killed because there was no plants or vegetables in the winter ground and stuff like that. That's what she thought about. My only rebuttal to that is, though, what about the countries who are 12-12? Like, they don't have a summer or a winter. They're closer to the equator.
Right.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, like people say like there's wet and dry seasons and that has an impact, but I don't know. Like, so it's just something as well that like I always kind of think about. That's a bit of a question as well. But there are certain things that definitely artificial light is, like, if you just think about it logically, it is so foreign to us, you know, that and the electromagnetic fields that we're constantly around now in terms of computers and phones, because. And I know when I think a lot of it too is that if you don't have the science or the foundation to understand a lot of this stuff, a lot of it sounds like woo. But then the more you get into physiology and the more you get into chemistry and biochemistry and then physics, you start to realize, there is like a lot of evidence to support this. So like with electromagnetic fields, like, I mean, us as humans, we basically are electrical units. I mean, and then when people hear that, like, they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, how do they measure our hearts in EKG? That's an electrical signal. How do they measure the brainwaves in your head? An ECG, electrical signals. Like, we're just a big electrical unit. That's what our nervous system is. And at the very fundamental level in the cell, you have the mitochondria, and they function at a certain frequency or hertz. Like, that's pretty well established now in terms of looking at the physics of the mitochondria, that it vibrates at a certain frequency and hertz. And then that by being around foreign electromagnetic fields, or what are called non-native EMFs, again, your fridge, your washing machine, computers, phones, there's evidence to suggest that screws up the energy process or the energy mechanism of the mitochondria. And mitochondrial dysfunction now has been shown to be behind every disease. Like, it precedes all chronic disease. Because if you can't make energy, you're dying, like. So blue light and non-native EMS seem to be the biggest instigators in damaging the mitochondria long term.
How? Right? So I think about this from everything is electrical, or everything is energy, right? So how is, and I go back and forth the whole EMF thing. If EMF was really an issue, and if cell phones really gave you ball cancer, you know what I mean? Like, having it in your pocket, I'll give it, man, testicular cancer would be through the fucking roof. Brain tumors would be through the roof, right? I mean, I heard Elon Musk say you could literally walk around with a cell phone helmet all day and all night, and it'd be perfectly fine. And when it comes to physics, I'm pretty sure I would trust I would take his word for it. I think there's a lot of hokey, like that kind of, that in theory, yeah, maybe, but in actuality, does it really mess with the electrical signals? How have we shown that it does? I don't know. There are things where I'm on board and I'm not. Like blue light. Yeah, that makes fucking perfect sense. What's blue light? Well, we look at the fucking sky. We look at the sun, right? That blue light mimics that. So when the sun sets, don't look at blue light. Wear blue light blocking glasses if you have to look at blue light. That makes sense to me. I mean, I had classmates wearing blue light blocking glasses in the middle of the day. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like, oh, it hurts my eyes. The blue light does? No, it doesn't. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, so looking at the sky hurts your fucking eyes. Like, so, I mean, people imagine a lot of things, and then it becomes, that narrative becomes true. But as far as the dysfunction or any kind of issue with mitochondria, I don't know. And even it even goes into radiation too, right? Everything has radiation. Everything has radiation. It's to what degree of radiation, like what amplitude or what magnitude of radiation it is. I mean, even a leaf has some kind of radiation. We're all radiation. So how much concentration of radiation is it? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to it is. And I know that there are people in Fukushima living life. So like, if that ain't bothering people, and Kier was telling me, he goes, man, I had full meals grown in Fukushima, ate there morning, afternoon, night, and I'm fucking fine. Everyone's fucking fine. You know, so there's whole set. They were going to have the fucking Olympics there. And did you see the special on Vice regarding it and how they did it? Oh my gosh, it's fucking wild. It shouldn't pass, but people are still living there. Everything's fucking cool. All right, whatever. So I don't know the answer to all this. And I'm a pretty big skeptic as well. However, I do happen to agree with you when it comes to health and mitochondria, and what some of the issues are. I don't necessarily buy into that, you know, laptops are the reason why mitochondria are dysfunctional. I think a lot of the dysfunction has to do with our fucking lifestyle, not our laptops. Like if you go, I mean, there are people that fucking, they're very, very healthy people that run all day, every day. And they're on the phone nonstop. Like they're super successful, you know, businessmen, and they have high blood pressure. Why? Because they're fucking stressed the fuck out, not because of a fucking laptop. Like they're in good health, and are their mitochondria good? Yes. Right. Like, so I don't, but again, how do we even go about measuring mitochondrial function? How, what's our metric for that?
It's actually, that's a good question, because a doctor that I studied mitochondrial medicine with, his name is Dr. Michael Kuchera, he's Russian. He utilized HRV, a HRV unit for it, to basically give a proxy of cellular energy, or energetics. And he would take your HRV and then he would give you what were called flavonoids and carnosine. So carnosine just, it basically helped with the electron transport chain. What I will say is the best researcher to look into mitochondria is Doug Wallace, and he's more than likely going to get a Nobel Prize. In terms of his, he was the guy who found out that you inherit all your mitochondria from your mother's side. And just something, I fully agree. I'm not saying it's purely EMF. It's multifactorial. Like there's multiple factors that impact on someone's health. But so Doug Wallace has done the main work on the mitochondria. What was I saying just before Doug Wallace there?
HRV.
Oh yes. So Dr. Michael Kuchera, he used HRV as a proxy into basically how well you were making energy. So he would give you carnosine and he'd give you these flavonoids, and it was all to do with making the proteins in the mitochondria more efficient, essentially, because Doug Wallace talks about what's called heteroplasmy rate. So essentially, to make this easy, on your inner mitochondrial membrane, you have the 5 proteins that basically they pump hydrogen ions in and out across the membrane, and eventually, at the end of the electron transport chain, you have oxidation. Like you have what am I trying to think of? Anyway, you get water and CO2 are your byproducts, and you get ATP made. Doug Wallace talks about that when someone becomes more dysfunctional in terms of mitochondria, those proteins, they spread apart further. So they become more inefficient. So basically the electrons and protons have to tunnel further.
So they denature. The proteins denature.
No, I don't know if it's that they denature, but they like, again, I don't know that, like, I'm not like, don't know the exact specifics. I just know it's called a heteroplasmic rate, and basically the 5 proteins on the inner mitochondria, and the last protein is where you make CO2 and water. So you reduce it down to CO2 and water, and you also get ATP made. But the proteins in a dysfunctional mitochondria, they spread out further now, and there has been evidence in rodent models that EMFs do that to mitochondria, that they spread out the proteins, so it makes the mitochondria more inefficient, makes it age quicker, and makes them become more mutated quicker. That's essentially it. Like
EMF.
Whereas, a non-native EMF, they've done it in rodent models.
And that is at a specific frequency of EMF. Like
Yeah.
there's millions of EMF frequencies, right?
Yeah,
Like
so
I
it's,
don't.
it's frequency. Yeah.
So like what?
But
what
are they nuking? Are they nuking the rats? Like, are they ramming it with serious
again?
high
So
levels?
the paper that I initially saw, I'd have to go back and read it. Like it was, you know what I mean? I'd have to go back and investigate. But I know that they've done EMF studies on rodent models and they've shown heteroplasmic rate to increase, which is not a good thing. Heteroplasmic rate is, again, where the proteins spread out further and they become more dysfunctional in terms of their energetics, where you want the proteins to be closer together, more energy efficient.
So what does that have to do with the HRV in that sense, right? Because HRV is another thing that's fucking multifactorial.
Yeah, so Dr. Kuchera just used it almost as a proxy. So in terms of, he was like, if your autonomic tone is better, so if your variability is increasing and getting stronger, it means he would use that as a proxy from an energetic perspective, that at a mitochondrial level you're healthier because you're more resilient. And so he would get a baseline measure of HRV, and then he would give you the carnosine or the succinate, and then he'd keep retesting it every month to see how you're going, and your HRV would keep improving, because these supplements again worked on that the mitochondrial proteins and the heteroplasmic rate and all that stuff. Like the physiology that he knew, he had that Russian accent and he made everything sound cool. He'd go, "You're the mitochondria," and I'm like, yeah, I'm fully getting this. Again, so like, listen, I don't know exact, like, this is where like I'm more, and again, Mike, I'm delighted to say you're a skeptic, because you should be that way. Like you don't want to be open-minded, you don't want to be closed-minded. What you want to be is critically minded. So it's always keep a critical mind about things. But that was just the work of Dr. Kuchera, which is very interesting. It's just another little thing, and then I'll let you guys jump into, is that just going back to the light, like I've heard other individuals propose that, so like it's called power density, basically, so that foods that are grown in longer light cycles, they have what's called greater power density, so that when the food that's grown in a summer season versus a food maybe grown in the winter season, and also your mitochondria have different, so the mitochondria function differently from summer to winter apparently, but again, because of light and all this, it regulates how fast they spin protons and all this. And when you break foods down into those anatomical particles, they spin at different rates and frequencies as they go through the different proteins, and that gives the mitochondria information about like the energetics of food and the time of year it is and all that. And that apparently that completely regulates all like our mitochondrial genetic expression. Because this is the other thing too. So what Doug Wallace is saying, that medicine is only focused on DNA genes in terms of disease, and he's like, that's not the magic bullet. He's like, the answer is they should be looking at mitochondrial DNA, because the mitochondria has its own genetics. Because the theory is that the mitochondria entered into the cell. It's actually a bacteria that evolved thousands of years ago, because it was so efficient at making energy that like our cell came and said, "Oh, here, you can come in here and live with us, and you make energy, and we'll give you food." And he's like, "All right." So they believe that it was its own entity, the mitochondria. That's why it has two membranes. It's a double membrane, outer and inner membrane. So that it entered our cell like in symbiosis billions of years ago, and that it has its own genes. Whereas like classical sort of biology was always just focusing on the nuclear genome, whereas Doug Watts, like, you need to focus on the mitochondrial genome in terms of trying to understand modern disease. So that's kind of where his research is going.
Robbie, what do you know about in terms of like seasonal eating too, and how that affects the circadian biology?
Well, that's kind of what I've been touching on, in that's what some people have proposed. Like, again, the first individual that I came across was T.S. Wiley, who wrote the book Lights Out, and that came out in the year 2000, and she got lambasted for that. Like, people were like, because again, she had no direct evidence. It was all, it was all like just sort of, she was piecing research together, and it was all inference from, like, she was connecting dots, but like she couldn't cite like any hardcore research to say this or that. She was just kind of like speaking about, now in fairness, half the book is like all these references, but again, they were just references where they're proxies and inferences and no hardcore science. But that's her thing, and that's kind of like what Mike alluded to too, in terms of like, again, the fact now that we have light and heat in our homes all year round and global transport of food, it means that you can eat just like you're in summer all the time. And again, going back to like just the principles that Watts talked about, it's all up and no down. It's not good. Like, you know, from a universal principle, like we need up and down, we need black, white, we need high carb, low carb, we need high fat, low fat, you know, that kind of way. So yeah, seasonal eating just, it makes common sense, but you know, like you are going to get people, and you probably can't argue this. They'll turn around and say, well, where's the evidence? And you kind of go, well, there is no hardcore, because one, like to do trials like that, it costs too much money. You couldn't get humans to do that. You know what I mean?
Oh, complicated too. I mean, because look, say like I live in Switzerland. I'm from the UK. It's not too far away. All right. More or less similar. But my missus is from Barbados, and it's winter now. And she really wants to eat passion fruit and mango, which, you know, we would never have been able to get. So, but because she's here in Swiss, should she be, you know, eating more like seasonal to this part of the world or to where she's from, you know? So it becomes so complex.
It's very interesting. Stuff, I don't think there's any answer to that. You know?
No, right. So I mean, you mentioned also about how Edison, you know, really fucked a lot of people up with light. I mean, I always think too about refrigerators. Yeah. And because, I mean, as soon as we invented the refrigerator, we could just store food for as long as we wanted, but that must have never been the case. I mean, if you look at hunters too, and especially if you go to different parts of the world and you look at, you know, different tribes and how they hunt and how they keep their food and stuff. I mean, it was always feast and famine. And you can see it throughout, you know, all of the major religions too, right? There's always these components of long, steady fasts, and we are not subject to that anymore at all because we love to go to bed with our belly full in a nice warm bed.
But again, it makes sense evolutionally. I mean, like, you know, we see food like, and we're just like, no, you know, because back in the day we wouldn't know when we were going to eat again, you know. And that kind of, I suppose now, you know, in terms of our cortex and our prefrontal lobes, that's kind of where it needs to say to, you know, the limbic system and the reptilian brain, like, you know, calm down. There's going to be breakfast tomorrow. You know, that. Like the cortex can rationally say, right, there is going to be a next meal, you're safe, it's okay. Whereas, you know, that's kind of where the reptilian brain, that doesn't realize, you know, oh, there's breakfast, there's lunch, dinner, it's just like food now. Right. Just when we're going to eat again, because back in the day it was all about survival, you know. You going to say something, Mike?
Yeah, I was just looking up the exact quote. 1/4 of what you eat keeps you alive. The other 3/4 keeps your doctor alive. That's so that's like an old school Egyptian proverb, right? I mean, that's an ancient, they say that's an ancient Egyptian proverb. So, I mean, we could say artificial fucking light. We could say whatever the fuck we want. We're just fucking pigs, no matter when we are, right? Like that's what we do. We indulge. So whether it's, oh, well, we used to feast and then famine and do this and up and down and left and right. Like I don't know. Have you seen the studies, or not the studies? I looked at one, I think it was a study or one video talking about a study. Maybe that's what it was, of the half diet, full diet with the chimpanzees, where there were 2 chimps. They gave one half the calories of the other one.
Yeah, and they lived longer, and they're saying that, like, this, you know, that's why they're saying like fast and stuff could lead to longevity. Yeah,
like I think he lived longer, and they were the same fucking size. Right? So that kind of went down the rabbit hole of, I think it was a little bit with the mTOR pathways and how the mTOR pathway is good for fucking building muscle and anabolism, right? Anabolism,
but it's shitty for longevity.
Yeah, right. So how much do you really need to eat? Is it fasting? Is it this? Is it that? Man, just stop eating so fucking much in general.
Right.
Yeah.
But we are in performance. Are we in longevity or are we in performance? What is our fucking goal? Well, I got to get my guys big, strong, and fucking fast.
Yeah,
and
well,
it just is what it is.
I think we spoke about this before, like in terms of like performance in sport isn't health.
No.
Like it's, and like sport is like, this is the thing I've said too, is like sport is a novelty to the human organism. Like at no point in evolution were you like out 3, 4, 5 days a week, putting those loads on tissues, you know, making the metabolism work that hard. Like, you know, if you were to take someone from a hunter-gatherer day and time warp them into like an NFL game in the stadium, or into football, or into Gaelic football or hurling here, and they'd sit down and watch, and they'd be very confused. They'd be like, why are you spending all this energy? What are you getting from it? No sex, no food.
I'll disagree. Slavery's been around as long as history's been around. Every fucking slave from every fucking culture has been working nonstop, day in, day fucking out, no matter what. So, I mean, someone's had to adapt to this. Someone is used to this. So I'll disagree with that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I get your point, but like what I mean is like in terms of like the human organism, to me anyway, like so when people talk about injuries, like non-contact, and they go non-contact injuries should never happen, and I'm like, I don't know about that, because again, like all like if you take, we basically have less resilient humans because of our modern lifestyle, and we put these loads on them that the system is not designed to. The density of the loads on the system is a novelty. You know, like at no time were people doing like 20 or 40 change direction turns on ligaments and tendons, you know, 3 to 4 times a week on a weaker structure now in terms of its physical capabilities, because most of us are sitting down on our arse all day. You know, we're more inflamed, and do you know what I mean? Like whereas back in the day, it was acute stress. You're out, you're running, and that was it. And then that was grand for 3 days, and then you might have to do another sprint again, and then that was grand for another 2 days. And it wasn't like 2 days or 3 days, you know, and then on less resilient systems.
I just suppose it depends on the culture. I mean, you look at all these there are warring cultures, even still in fucking Africa, where these motherfuckers go, they run, they fucking hunt, and then they kill motherfuckers. Like that's what they do day in and day out. And then the other ones that don't do that, they dig for fucking roots. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I think where you are right is we go from something to nothing and nothing to something way too quickly. And the resilience is not built up where this is a lifestyle for them. They're capable of doing that where
that's cool.
So yeah, but I don't know. Look at David fucking Goggins. This motherfucker. Do you know who David Goggins is?
Yeah, but he also, when he was on Rogan, right, he speaking, and then he goes, yeah, and then I ended up in hospital for a while, and I don't know why. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know why? Because you completely burnt out your HPA axis, you mad thing. Like, so he's just, so he did fuck himself up.
Yeah, and the only thing that actually, so he had like some fucking knob on the back of his head, Brooker, and it was, who the fuck knows, but the only thing that got that knob to go down was like stretching his hip flexors. So he's
psoas, right?
Yeah, he just.
I think he also has. I'm not sure what the disease is, but he loses blood flow to his fingers. His fingers go all like yellow and white or something like that.
That's the shit like that isn't being publicized when it comes to that, you know. Like,
totally, but again, like that guy's an extreme example. But we are capable of significantly more than we think. Like we're not fragile, right? Like right now we're cunts, but we weren't made to be this way. You know, we were made to be way tougher and more resilient than we are.
Yeah, we're very docile now. I mean, I always come down to, I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and once them bottom ones are done, at the top, self-actualization, like achieving one's full potential. I mean, Goggins thinks that he's achieving his full potential there. So he's getting something far greater, it seems like. And I mean, when we was talking also earlier on about, Jesus Christ, 2 hours sleep last night. It's catching up with me. I'm losing track here. About the importance of sleep. There we go. That's perfect. When we were talking about the importance of sleep, right? And if, say, like, for example, now, if I had to operate into an emergency situation, how much sleep I've had, hopefully it's not really going to be that much dependent on it. If it's something that it's not, like in terms of like the emotional demand, like let's say, for example, if the house is on fire, I'm going to still try and go and rescue my baby from the second floor to come out the house rather than if I had a couple more hours sleep, I'd be able to do it or not. You know what I mean? It'd be the same even if I had a hamstring pull. I'm pretty sure that's gone out the window when I'm trying to get out of this place.
But it depends on what your body registers as a genuine emergency situation. Now, if you're a first responder, your job as emergency situations, it ceases to be registered as an emergency situation.
It becomes the norm.
Yeah. That's their norm. So sleep deprivation in their emergency situations does have a genuine impact. But for us, man, we could be fucking on our deathbed and then an emergency situation comes up and we sleep deprived for a couple of fucking days, I guarantee we will, we will adapt to it. However, it will have consequences down the road, but we'll be okay. But I understand what Robbie was saying with that as well. Like that's way, way, way different.
I'm just making sure as well. I was looking up there because I know I had a bit of brain fart. I was meant to say oxidative phosphorylation. The end products, is what goes on electron transport chain, and the end products are CO2 and water. I did say CO2 and water, but I just want to make sure. Aerobic respiration is what I usually call it.
I was going to say cellular respiration.
Yeah, aerobic respiration is what I meant to say, but people also say oxidative phosphorylation, and the end products are CO2 and water. But aerobic respiration is what I usually say. So again, going back to that, is that the mitochondrial dysfunction is when the proteins open up, and it makes that whole process more inefficient. But Brooker, just in terms of the hypnosis, where do you plan to go with that? I'm just interested in hearing more of that.
Right now, I'm looking at how could I possibly create like self-hypnotic audios and put them out, and to see, because the truth is, it now appears that there's no difference between if you're listening to an audio or if someone's guiding you through it. And if anything, it can even be more effective, like due to current research, if you're taking the initiative, you've got an audio and you're doing it to yourself, because all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, right? So it's not what I'm doing to someone, it's what they're basically allowing themselves to do. So I'm really interested in a couple different branches of like clinical hypnosis. I really love active alert, which is more of this. It's not like a sleep trancey style of hypnosis. It's actually the complete opposite. It's being much more alert and energetic. I'm really interested in that, and also how to put that into sports. And so that's also one of the reasons I signed up for an Ironman, and I really want to put these techniques in there and combine different elements from, really self-hypnosis, also different music beats, not like the binaural beat stuff. I'm not really too interested in that. But, if you see different tribes, for example, when they do different dancing, or if you look at like Santa Daime rituals and stuff, and the different drums, it puts people into altered states of consciousness, right? Or rhythmic dance and stuff. Well, there's nothing more rhythmic than being on a bike or jogging if things are flat. And stuff, right? And you can kind of get yourself there. And I really like this idea of trying to understand what else can you get out of your head when you shift your attention away from, I'm fucked, my legs are dead, I want to go home, I want to go and eat. And if you shift it into another direction, what is there? What else are you able to do? But there's some really fascinating in research in it. If you're interested, you should look up anything that Dr. David Spiegel's done from Stanford. One of the best studies that he did, and it really got me interested in it. He took stage 4 metastatic breast cancer patients, and he found that the hypnosis group compared to the control, not only did they require like barely any medication compared to the control group, because they learned how to relieve their own pain, but they also lived 18 months longer on average, which is fucking fascinating. So I think there's a lot there. And I think there's a lot up here, but we look away to try and teach us, whereas I think that we can do a lot more with our own head, and I kind of want to look into that a bit more.
Yeah, you sent some tapes to Raf from my muscle project, didn't you?
I sent one audio to him that I was experimenting with. I also sent it to Mike, but that's like now my thing, because my PhD was meant to be done on bicycle power tests. I wanted to get like an anaerobic test, an aerobic test, and also then archery for accuracy, and then look at different hypnosis and just to see how we can influence sport performance. But now, because of all Corona, and also, to be completely honest, I want to try and do this smart, and it's just been a really pain in the ass procedure, this whole thing. So now I'm going to look at, let's take technology. If people don't care, like, there's studies out there now that people have just the same effects with, making their migraines feel better than they do if it's online audio or in person. Why not just create certain things up? I've got a strong desire to do that too. For a long time now, is write some audios and just put them out and see what happens, mate, to be completely honest. I see it more as a creative part to me. I really enjoy doing it. It's really crazy. Some of the people's experiences that they've had on it. I've had some really great responses with different people too, but I'm also really aware that it's not for everybody. It can be really blown up. There's a lot of bullshit around it. And, you know, so I'm in two places. I'm not like ranting and raving and screaming and shouting about it, but a lot of people want to talk about it. And I think there's some great stuff, but I don't know where the far reaches of it are. You know, I definitely don't think you can be, you know, curing yourself of cancer. But I do know, for example, if you've got IBS, hypnosis is a great thing. Why? Because, you know, calming your body down, returning back to parasympathetic, well, that has a lot of great benefits for many people. And that Dr. David Spiegel, he's now using Alexa for smoking cessation. I mean, they've got like a 50% success rate with smokers. I mean, that's pretty fucking sweet, you know. And then also with pain management too. And that goes again into this, you know, with the different research that he did. He also had great results with people with Parkinson's, you know, helping people calm down from Parkinson's so they can actually use their hands again and stuff. So you were talking before about, you know, you want to give a gift to the world. For me, that's the only thing that really gets me kind of going. And I know that it's going to take 10 years and I feel like a complete dickhead going into a music studio with my mate and trying to make beats. I feel like, what am I doing here? This is not, you know, you feel like a complete, you know, you feel like an idiot. You know what I mean? But I think there might be something there and I'm going to give it a go. And yeah, I'll send some stuff over if you're ever interested, because what's really cool, mate, is on the spectrum, right? You got always people that are low responders, people that are high responders. Well, the beautiful thing is there's so many people in the world, and with the internet, you can reach everybody. Let's say that 20% of the population are high responders. Well, let's go into that market and let's see what sort of thing we can do, and also hear feedback from people, and then start making, you know, especially if you can combine hypnosis and exercise together, that's a really interesting stack, because you're not just only getting the physiological benefits, but you might be getting some of the psychological benefits too. And hypnosis, it was the first form of psychotherapy back in like 1800s. So, yeah.
What about your PhD, Mike?
So with my doctorate, I haven't started my doctorate yet. I'm taking some fucking time off since I graduated with my master's, because I'm fucking beat. But with doctorate, we don't have to do research. There's no research involved. However, one thing that I do want to research is one thing that's big is trigger point. Okay, and I posted a video of it as to what a fucking trigger point needling actually is. With dry needlers commonly do it is you find like a knot, you find a tender area, you needle it, and then you get like a muscular fasciculation. I want to do some EMG research before and after, right? What the impact does it actually have? How many motor units are actually firing beforehand? How many are firing after? How many are firing a week later? Does it actually have any kind of impact? Now, there is research regarding blood flow, or I shouldn't even say blood flow, but fluid, right? There's some kind of increase in flow of fluid, but not necessarily improvement in any kind of muscular contraction that I'm aware of. Have you read any of it?
I personally haven't, but I'm a dry needlist. I've done because I did neuromuscular therapy here in Ireland, which would be the equivalent of like manual therapy in the States, and adjuncts to that was dry needling. And the research at the time was saying that a trigger point was an energy crisis, you know, the calcium on it, and it's contracture, and essentially like the needle goes in, and you know it's all to do with pressures and all this. And the only thing I'd say is it'd be very hard to measure motor unit recruitment before and after. Well, it depends if you're just using surface EMG. That there's been loads of research show it's very unreliable. If you can actually put electrodes in, you know, like needles, and actually see is there changes in, I don't know, voltages across cell membranes or whatever. I think like anything, you're probably it's going to be one of those things where you get the real evidence based practitioners who are very like critical, and they think anything like cupping and needling, and even manual therapy is all woo and no one knows what's going on. But then you get the other side of people going, listen, if Mr. Jones comes in and I do a needle and he gets up and he's like, that feels amazing, and his day is made, I'm like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. So there's
exactly
that. I'm with that, right? But I have seen improvements. There's improvements in range of motion. There's improvements in pain-free, right? Like that. I don't know what to tell. Now there are instances where I have seen people get nothing out of it, and I have seen people become overly sore, but no long-term damage. If anything, it's not necessarily too much of a maladaptation that I've noticed with the needling, unless you're a fucking asshole and you go a little too ham. But properly done trigger points, I really haven't seen, other than a little soreness, no long-term negative effects. Now I'm also aware of the concept of, hey, we've tried everything, now let's fucking just try stabbing it, right? Like I get how stupid it is. I get how much sense it just doesn't make. Like, how does me assaulting the muscle with a fucking needle and causing it to fucking spaz seem like a good idea that it's actually going to help, right? You're introducing an external stimuli that is causing so much mayhem to homeostasis that it causes an uncontrollable and involuntary twitch that scares the shit out of most people. How does that seem like a good idea? For everything that I practice, that type of acute response or the acute treatment, that doesn't coincide with what I do. However, people feel better. And sometimes people feel better instantly from this stuff, like forever, right? I've seen people with injuries that are like nagging hamstrings, and someone sticks in one needle, one twitch, they come back and they're like, I haven't had pain since. And it's been nagging them for 2-3 years, right? What is that needle doing? I'd really like to understand what the fuck is going on. But then again, so would everyone else. Now, I think EMG studies should be done with that. I don't think there's enough studies with this type of stuff. I talked to the dean of my school as far as buying an EMG. I asked PAF, I was like, hey, which one should I go for? I asked Flaherty, what they would do. They both recommended the same thing. So I said, all right, maybe I'll go with that. Things like 10 grand. I said, hey, maybe I'll donate it to the school and we can have a huge study for something like this and just give it we'll go like the vastus medialis, something that's easy to trigger, right? Figure that out. Boom. Does it actually improve muscle recruitment? Does it improve any kind of strength? Who knows? I would love to do something like that. I think that would be advantageous to coming to answers. But the problem with a lot of these things is if you get the wrong answer, where now you're killing a career. Now you're finding out that trigger point doesn't actually improve. And this is what people do for a living. Like this is their livelihood. So now it's like, this becomes dangerous. Do you really want to find out that this doesn't do the right thing?
Yeah, but just also because you don't find what you want to find, don't mean that you've come up with the best testing techniques too, right? And I mean, there's still people, if they're feeling better, that's a really important thing because, and we was talking about at the beginning, if you go and branch out and learn from different fields, maybe you can translate some of the learnings across. I mean, you were saying there, Mike, and I'm with you too, because I think, if you look at it just being, it's so direct. I mean, I like it too, but in the right time and place, dry needling. But if you look at it from a psychological perspective, you go straight in exactly where you don't want to go. And, in terms of exposure therapy or anything like that, that's the best technique. So, I don't know. My 2 cents in it. They make some sort of sense.
I think my sort of thought process on therapeutic inputs is that you're not going to be like, people are so individual. Do you know, like, so it's the perception of the individual. Like, you know, it's no different to when we talk about adaptation to training. Like, okay, in a training sense, there is a global adaptation that we can say, you know, if I lift heavy things and Mike lifts heavy things, yeah, our strength, our biomotor ability of strength will increase. But to what degree and how much recovery I need and how much volume and density pattern of strength work do I need in comparison to Mike, and then my training history, my injury, my biomechanics. I mean, that's all transferable to therapy. In terms of therapy is a stressor, there's a different perception, there's a different nervous system. Like, not only is there inter-individual differences between, like, again, me and Brooker, or me and Mike, or Mike and Brooker, but there's intra-individual differences, you know. So from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, I'm a different physiological organism on a table. So I might respond well to needling on Monday, but if we do the same therapeutic input on Thursday, who knows where my physiology is at that day. So there's so many variables and spinning wheels that I'd say, again, the research is like inconclusive. Some people got a benefit, some people didn't. Even people that got benefit, some days did and some days they didn't. Because the way I always look at the human system is, and this is a very simplistic way, it's just input, what was the output? And the thing is that input and output, it's dynamic and it's in flux within the same individual. You know, so the input one day can have a drastically different output another day. I mean, that's why, again, like, you see like all these videos going around, like, I mean, when Charles Poliquin, rest in peace, but there's that video where like he looks at someone's hamstring and then he presses on like their TMJ and then does the hamstring test again and improves. And it's like, oh my God. And it's just because, yeah, all he done was like a therapeutic input, something to do with fight-flight mechanism and, you know, autonomics, and he just retested a hamstring. And yeah, it's like, it's basically, it's your nervous and sensory systems that rule the roost. And again, that comes back to your brain. Your brain rules the roost. And the example I love in that is when they knock people out, like they put them underneath an anesthetic, and it's just like they grab their leg and they just like put their leg basically up to their face, because there's no nervous system to protect. I mean, that is, your nervous system in terms of the musculoskeletal system is there just as a protective mechanism to make sure you don't tear it off bone. That's why, like, that's what strength work is. As you get stronger and build your strength age up over the years, you're chipping away at neural inhibition. You're telling the nervous system, right, and brain, it's okay, it's safe to let me pick up the heavier weight, or it's safe to let me express these loads at a high velocity. And obviously the great athletes have the great neurological systems, but in terms of therapeutics, I just see it like that. I know in Joel Jameson's book, the HRV manual, he had a beautiful thing in that, and he was like saying that as a general, very general model, and again, I don't think there's any research for this, but he was like, you basically have individuals who are a little more sympathetically wired and individuals who are a little more parasympathetically wired, and in terms of their therapeutic inputs, they need different things. So he was like, and I've seen this just from a practitioner perspective. Like, you get the very high strung type A personality person, you know, the person you put your hands on, like, and they literally just like, if you did any sort of deep tissue work, they hate it. They're like, oh God, everything's sore to them. They're like, oh, he dug into me. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was more of a stress. They like effleurage and petrissage and gentle rocking and needling, and they just like to be basically pampered. What they like is a spa massage. That's what they want. But then you get your real, like, lay back, dopey, parasympathetic, easygoing, like too easygoing. Like, they need some stimulus. You know, they're the people that are like, oh, like, if you do too soft, they're like, it was shit. It was too soft. I wanted like him to dig into me. They're the people that are like, oh, he was brilliant. That massage therapist, he dug in. It was terrible, but I felt like $1,000,000 afterwards. You know, like, they're the guys that when you're needling them, they're like, oh, yeah, stick in a load of needles, it's grand. Whereas, like, if you do that to the sympathetic person, they're like, are you going to do like the needle thing? Do you have to, like, they're always having a stress response. So you're like, we're not going to do needles at you because you won't get the output we want, the response we want. So I think it's just very individual. It
is, mate. And as you mentioned, from the nervous system and from a purely physiological point of view, it's very, very difficult. But then what about the narrative? What about the expectations? What about things like placebo? I mean, I'm pretty sure Scott Adams said once when he was doing hypnotherapy, a guy come to see him, and what he would do usually he'd have an introduction with guys and he'd explain it to them at the beginning sessions, and then they would slowly get better. And of course, with everything, the more you do it, the better you get. But one guy come in once and he was a bit rushed for time, so he just went sleep, and the guy went into the state. But then he realized later on, I've never seen that guy before. So how the hell did that work? That's what the guy walked in and expected straight. You know what I mean? So there's so many factors going on, man. And I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of it. That's my point.
That's what keeps it interesting.
Yes, mate.
Yeah, that's what pisses me off. All right, let's wrap it up. You got to go.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you got your blue light.
Oh, there we go.
Speaking of blue blockers, these are only the early evening, where the later ones are the orange ones. Brooker, be sure to send on some audios. Mike, pleasure as always catching up.
Right on, guys.
Yeah, cheers, Robbie, bye.
All right, see you, man. Have a good evening.
You too, fella. Speak to you soon.
See you soon, boys.